It's not really like highbrow journalism to be in the bushes, is it? Trying to sort of jump out on sort of people, but and certainly the former Garda Superintendent John Spud Murphy wouldn't be expecting anyone to jump out of a bush on him.
Yeah.
But tell us the story about Shelton Abbey and your highbrow journalistic career.
Well, I mean, there's a context anyway. Obviously, John Spud Murphy has been moved to Shelton Abbey, which is an open prison.
Yeah,
and you know,
beautiful.
Like it's like I suppose it's like a country sort of
it's like
manor.
Brideshead revisited.
It is, and I think it actually is. That is what it was. It was one of these country estates.
Yeah,
it's been turned into an open prison, and what an open prison means is, like most days, if you're there, guys. The prisoners walk out.
Yeah.
They go to jobs. They get a bus further up. They do get driven actually up a lot of the time by the prison service.
Shop and get a coffee. They can do kind of way more regular stuff than you can in the mainstream prison system.
But about 50% of them, I'd say, actually have a job and they go out to the job during the day.
Yeah.
They get bus there and then they come back at night and they're not supervised during this time. So that's open prison. People probably don't fully realise that. And obviously not everybody goes into an open prison. If you're in for 3 or 4 months for not paying your TV licence, you're not going to be put in there. So a lot of them are long-term lifers really. So I was sent down there to look for Malcolm MacArthur walking out. Malcolm MacArthur obviously... is he considered a serial killer? But he certainly...
Yes, I think he is. He had a mad spree of murder in Dublin many, many decades ago and was one of the longest serving prisoners in the system.
Yeah, a very...
he was released.
From a very sort of aristocratic background and ended up, you know, going on this murder spree, a very unusual story. It's the focus of even recent podcasts. Yeah. Bizarrely, actually, this just shows you how life turns. I saw him. I was on Grafton Street the other day and he walked past me.
I see him all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Still in the dapper.
Still in the dapper Dawn. He was going into Marks and Spencer's with the dicky bow and everything. Barely blinked an eyelid. There he is. There's Malcolm MacArthur.
One of those sort of characters of Dublin now, and he gets on and off the buses and all the rest of it. I mean, it's bizarre.
So I'm sure everybody has seen him, but back in the day, so I was sent down to get a sight of Malcolm MacArthur.
Well, he hadn't been photographed in years.
So, exactly. So, it was Christmas time and, you know, just after Christmas, which is a really tough time for newspapers because even the criminals and stuff take a break for Christmas and chill out a lot of the time. So, I was sent down there with a photographer and we were told, we hear he's walking around and just get a picture of him and it'll be great, you know. And, but of course, all these things are easier in
Well, I'd point out the obvious as well. Yeah. It would have been bloody cold to be hanging around.
Yeah, it was freezing. And then it's all very well to say, take a picture. It's just a lovely place.
Yeah.
But there is security still there. Like there is cameras and all the rest of it. You can't
just hang around a place like that.
Well, actually, you can just literally drive in.
And stay in the car for the day.
Well, no, you couldn't. But you can drive in. Like there's no gate or anything.
Of course.
Like,
sure, it's the same up in...
Locken House.
In Locken House.
Yeah.
You can drive in. There's a coffee shop actually as well in it. But you couldn't sit there for the day, obviously, trying to take a photograph of somebody.
But so it wasn't just not as simple as possible. So eventually we did climb the side of the hill. I'll just never forget it. It just started pissing rain.
Did it?
And
as many would say, it served you right.
Well, it probably did. And I just remember sitting there and, you know, never prepared for any of these things. You know, I was in my runners or whatever and just looking down as about an inch of water congregated in my boots and thinking, how has life come to this?
Yeah. I mean, what a way to earn a living.
Yeah.
Did he show up? Well, he was hardly going to walk in the rain.
No, we did actually get a picture of him because he went for a walk every day, and I think was there ducks down there or something like that.
He fed the ducks.
He fed the ducks every day.
So that was quite a scoop, like, because MacArthur would have been in for decades and decades.
Yeah, but I think there had been a couple of pictures, but yeah, that's. I mean, we don't do that. The younger journalists don't do that, do they?
They have never had a baptism of fire like that. I mean, we definitely spent many. I used to have the best of kit in the boot of my car, the absolute best of waterproof warm.
The millennials and the Gen X or the Gen Zers, they're not expected to hide in bushes.
They're
with
not
the same
expected to hide in bushes. Yeah, it's a much more dignified job nowadays. But anyway that is Shelton Abbey, and it is there's many a story in Shelton Abbey. There was the famously John Cunningham, formerly Christy Kinhin Senior's top business partner, and the Jennifer Guinness kidnapper was there in Shelton Abbey, and he was coming towards the end of his sentence, and he just got pissed off and walked out the gate one day and never went back, went to Amsterdam and became a major drug dealer.
Yeah, and incredibly only had a really, really brief period left, didn't he?
Because he was returned to serve it, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Like the open prisons are, they can be sort of vaguely controversial, but I mean, the point of them is to reintegrate somebody to society who's maybe been locked away for a long time.
Yeah.
To try and give them a skill set and to try and give them back their independence that you've taken from them. Because, of course, our penal system here is all about depriving people of their liberty.
I mean, I think, in fact, the open prisons have to be commended for the most part. And they don't just put everybody there just given the amount of time you spent behind bars. So they do try and prioritise people that
need it and that should need it,
and that are also making an effort.
Yes, and are low risk of reoffending. And look, sometimes they get it wrong. There has been people coming towards the end of life sentences. Brian Kenny, for example, gangland killer, he was sent up to Loughlin House and he got a day out and came back and was caught with a load of drugs in his cell and was removed back to the main prison population, where he will have to reapply for parole. Johnny Mangan, who was in prison on gun offences, he escaped after a day out and started threatening people, I think, on a phone and had to be put back into the main prison system. So sometimes it all goes wrong. But what I don't understand is, what is a privileged prisoner like the former Superintendent John Spud Murphy doing, taking a place in Shelton?
Well,
what is it going to do for him? He isn't that long jailed. He's had a very lengthy career within the Guards. He retired. He's hardly looking for work when he comes out. Why does somebody like him get to get into Shelton Abbey?
Well, I don't know. And I mean, it's certainly a curious mix, because obviously there's a small category of prisoners that are highly protected in the prison system. Some of them are maybe ex-prison officers who've fallen foul of the law, known people like Jonathan Dowdall who've given evidence on behalf of the state. And then ex-guards. There's a number of ex-guards in prison at the moment, small number, but some of them for domestic violence issues. And obviously John Spud Murphy has been in protective custody. Now he's going to end up in an open prison with, I believe Brian Meehan is still there as well, for example, the member of the John Gilligan gang who murdered Veronica Guerin. So it's going to be a funny mix. I mean, there's no highly protected wings in Shelton Abbey. I mean, I think it's kind of a dormitory system, is it? As far as I know.
Because you have to prove that you're able to behave and interact with all sorts of, and perhaps Murphy is there for that very reason, to test the other prisoners to see how they'll behave with him. Because, of course, he has been segregated within the prison system. And just to remember, he was caught and jailed, pleaded guilty to the possession of a large amount of drugs, which were found during a search of his property in Dublin, being conducted on foot of an investigation into corruption, into allegations that certain members of the Gardaí were working in collusion with organised crime gangs over a long period of time, and were, feeding them with information. And of course, John Spud Murphy is at the centre of this investigation. He's understood to have been linked strongly with the Hutch organised crime group and others. We don't know exactly what the allegations are of what he was doing for them, but he was a very senior member of the force and a very valuable guy for anybody to have in their pockets, should that be the case. But so he's in there, but he will be hated because he's a guard, because within the prison system, there's certain prisoners that are there is a hierarchy.
There's absolutely a hierarchy. I mean, and at the very bottom would be ex-guards and ex-prison officers. And obviously, informers like Jonathan Dowdall. I mean, obviously the sex offenders as well have to be segregated. That didn't always have to be that way, but it's certainly for the last couple of decades, sex offenders are kept completely separate from other prisoners and people who've maybe done harm to children, maybe child killers, things like that. So Shelton Abbey doesn't have the facility to keep somebody separate. Everybody is in there and expected to behave. So, I mean, Sir Brian Meehan, as I mentioned, I think Smokey Costello, Christopher Smokey Costello, one of the people serving life for the murder of Kieran Keane Jr. or Kieran Keane Sr. Is also in there. So these people have, and I mean, Smokey Costello was regarded as being one of the tough guys you didn't mess with when you in the mainstream prison system. So it's going to be a funny mix. But obviously, the prisoners that get to Shelton Abbey are regarded as being on a path to rehabilitation, and many of them are. But John Murphy, it's a funny route his life has taken when he's just one of. He's going to be bunking up potentially with people that he spent a lengthy career, at least in theory, chasing down. I
mean, he was a guy that over his career rubbed shoulders with journalists, with celebrities. He had friends in all the high places. He was at one point, I think, in charge of traffic in Dublin, the capital, maybe across the country. I can't remember. He was really well known. He came from a family that had long tradition in the Garda Síochána. And, I would have said he was somebody that people, knew was a bit tricky. Well, I certainly wouldn't have had a clue that what he's been investigated for now, the links that are being sort of examined. But I would have always thought he was a bit tricky. I mean, character. I wouldn't have liked him, wouldn't have liked his company, but he was regularly in the company of media, celebrities, politicians, and other people in positions of power and with information, presumably. And I mean, he sort of cultivated people, I think, in positions of power for sure. And, I'd imagine not many of those people are now visiting him in Shelton Abbey. No. And I mean, you'd wonder, what does he do when he comes out? I mean, I don't think he needs to be there to be reintegrated into society, because I don't think he's been away long enough, or, there's certainly he pleaded guilty, but there has been no communication between him. He has been quizzed a few times, I think, in jail in relation to this corruption investigation, which is said to be the biggest corruption investigation in the history of this state. And Murphy has been described to me on a number of occasions by a number of people as somebody who was not corrupted, but was from the beginning almost like a crook in the clothing of a guard, and he used his position from the very beginning. What was that movie we watched? And Jack Nicholson is the lead.
The Departed.
The Departed. Similar sort of stuff. Maybe he was from the offset. He was somebody who was mixing in those wrong circles rather than somebody who was later in his life corrupted. And they're all allegations, by the way. It's all still under investigation.
Obviously, when his case did come to court, he gave maybe a different picture of his situation. He described himself, or his legal representative described himself as being an alcoholic who'd made a number of bad business investments, many of them abroad. His life had sort of spiraled out of control in between these business debts and his addiction to alcohol, and this had led him down the wrong path and taken this chance. So that's his version of events, I suppose, that we've heard in an open court.
We can only presume his pension has stopped,
No, I don't think
is he still entitled to a Garda pension?
Well, I would think he is. I mean, I think by law, it doesn't matter what you do. If you've paid into your pension, you can get it back. This has obviously proved controversial with a number of across the world probably as well in these situations. But as far as I know, in Irish law,
it'd be different had he been serving when he was convicted in relation to the drugs. But the fact that he was well retired, because of course he retired, there was a very sort of actually a party was held for him for his retirement that was covered in the social pages of media.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he cultivated all sorts of people and people in RTE and people RTE and beyond, and was a regular, I suppose, in the sort of nightclubs and pubs that make the back of the papers. But yeah, he still receives his pension, because we've seen this before with maybe politicians who've been found guilty of corruption or other celebrities, and once you've paid in, you can get it back. It's almost legally impossible to deny that, no matter what your actions are. But John Murphy, yeah, he's going to come out to a very different world than he went in. And it's funny, actually, I suppose, if you look at that moment, if you look at who attended his events and who he's now being forced to mix a very different story.
For sure. Okay, Niall, thank you.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.